Michael, perhaps we could start with you. Obviously, the film is inspired by and owes a lot to the issues around the trial of the murder of Meredith Kircher. So perhaps you could just kind of tell us about how you became involved in this project. You know, the beginnings of it.
Well, obviously, there was a huge amount of press coverage of the case, the real case this is based on in Italy. And I, by chance, read a book by an American journalist based in Rome called Barbie Lassanado. And I went to meet her in Rome. And she seemed to be an interesting character. She's really nice, very intelligent, very cooperative. And I kind of felt like maybe this story would be a way of exploring the media and why the media is so obsessed with crime, with violence, with murder, and you know, in both fictional forms and real forms. And then as we started working on it, you know, we kind of really felt actually we didn't really want it to be just about the media or be about that. We wanted it to be more about love. You know, like at the center of a crime, you know, like a murder, you have someone who's lost their life, and it wanted to be about a kind of love for someone who's been taken away for whatever reason, whether it's like with Thomas that he's separated from his daughter for quite normal kind of mundane reasons, or the family of Elizabeth in our film who've lost their daughter for more terrible reasons, and to try and move from a kind of exploration of crime in the media towards something more about love and loss.
And I'm kind of interested, Zion, Genevieve, in kind of how you approach the roles, because the roles are fictional characters, but they are, as kind of Michael's kind of intimating at, based on figures in the media about whom, you know, there's much speculation. So I guess just how did this kind of background buzz inform the way you approached the characters?
Well, as Michael was saying, there's a huge amount of media around this trial, but I guess you've seen the film, it's not a whodunit, and from my perspective as an actor, it certainly wasn't my place to give my character any kind of judicial insight or comment, and the character I play, I think, you know, is an enigma, and as Michael was saying, that aspect of the film is only one aspect. There are other trajectories, and it links with other tragic and interesting themes like loss on different kind of concrete and abstract levels. So yes, it is in some ways, but it's also about a lot more.
Yeah, I think obviously it was very different for me to Genevieve, but I didn't really want to look into Meredith for my character because I didn't want to emulate someone's child. You know, it was a very sensitive subject, but I kind of talked with Michael about it and things like that, and created Elizabeth as her own person.
Paul, perhaps you could talk about how the script developed, because it's, you know, it's incredibly complex structure and thematically quite dense. I mean, as well as, you know, being the story of a trial and the story of the reporting of a trial, it also throws in elements of Dante there and so forth. So, you know, how closely did you work with Michael on the script, and just tell us a little bit how that structure developed?
So Michael had already gone and met Barbie when I came on board. He came to me and said, "Do you fancy doing this?" And I was obviously very interested in the journalist aspect. You know, basically how the story of the world is presented to us, whether it's through social media, whether it's through straight journalism, television, blogging, whatever. And we took that as our kind of starting point, and I wrote a script, a draft, which was fairly accurate to what actually happened, I think, probably in the trial. And then we kind of realised that wasn't going to be the whole story. And actually, at that point, I think I was kind of struggling slightly with the material. I found it very tragic. I have 2 children. I think we both have children. So we both found it quite a difficult time. And then it kind of became a thing where you kind of thought you want to do an honourable thing here, actually. And one of the key moments was that I found it very, very difficult to write dialogue for these two. And so we started putting stuff into the film for Thomas that was what was happening to us, I suppose. You know, meetings we were going to, people, there's other scenes that aren't in the film where I met people and they kind of went, right, okay, that one, you know. So I started putting those in as a way of kind of slightly coping with the amount of material, partly, but also just what our trajectory was trying to be. And gradually, we kind of got to this thing where we wanted to do a telescope, wasn't it? Kind of looking down from, you know, the kind of journalist looking at the trial, you know, Thomas looking at the journalists, and then who's looking at him, you know. It didn't feel right to leave ourselves out of the equation and question what we were doing a little bit. And I think by the time we did that, that kind of shunted everything back, and we ended up with these stories where, at the end of it, you really can. I was looking around at the journalists and the people who were involved in it, and I'm going, who did it and all this, and it was really like an unsolvable mystery, and they're all disappearing down the plug hole, basically, down into kind of a Dante-esque kind of hell of no answers.
Well, Daniel was the first person I cast. I really admired him as an actor, but also quite a lot of people that I know worked with him on Rush, because Revolution Films was one of the production companies on Rush. And so I knew he was a really nice guy to work with as well, which is always a big advantage in trying to cast someone. It's nice if you can find people you like to work with. And I met him in Brussels and talked to him, and he was really intelligent about the script, and was, you know, he's a really bright guy and really nice guy as well. And I think the idea that Paul and I had was that we wanted to make sure that we weren't making a film which is like we're criticising the media in terms of journalists, but pretending we're not part of that in some way. So we deliberately made Thomas's character have as many flaws as we could to make sure that he was as least as flawed as the journalist he was trying to make his film about. And but at the same time, I think with Daniel, it kind of felt like he would perhaps be sympathetic enough that you still want him to come out of his crisis. You still want to somehow kind of survive the experience of trying to make the film. I guess it's always tempting to mess around with a story if you can, but that isn't the reason. The reason that Thomas is there, you know, as I was just saying, really the reason Thomas is there is that it seemed, when I met Barbie, one of the things that was interesting was that Barbie in her book, and then Barbie meeting her, the journalist who wrote about this case, seemed to make a kind of parallel between the life the journalists were having going up to Perugia and back in the real case, covering the story, and the life of the students that they were covering. So there's quite a lot of stuff in the press about the students here in Perugia. It was like party time, and it was this environment that kind of created the possibilities of this crime happening. But then, you know, then talking to Barbie and that, it seemed like the journalists were having a parallel time. You know, they're going out for a couple of days to Perugia, having a bit of a drink, a bit of a meal, getting on with each other. And there's a sort of sense that they were behaving the same way as the students in lots of ways, but they were writing, kind of taking the moral high ground and criticizing people. And I think in general, one of the problems with journalism is that it kind of always is, you know, exposing other people without talking about itself. So I kind of felt that if we were going to make a film which in part is about the media's role covering cases like this, that I didn't want it to feel like we were saying that we were better than them, that we should be outside that. So Thomas is there really not to make the storytelling more complicated or to make it, you know, kind of about making a film. For me, it's not about making a film. It's about people who lost their daughter or, you know, lost someone they've loved. But it was more to clarify that we're not trying to say that we are at least aware. It's complicated, but at least we're aware that we are also part of the media. So we're also making a film about this story, and that we're not exempt from all the criticisms we're making of other people. And maybe Paul wants to talk about this as well. From my point of view, I mean, you know, obviously, whenever you make a film about real events, it's important to be, you know, as accurate and honest as you can be. And I've made a lot of films that deal with real people's stories, and you always have to try and make sure that you feel what you're doing is right. You know, I think, you know, it's worth remembering. There's been a huge amount of press coverage about that story. You know, there's been, you know, as soon as it happened, 2 or 3 days later, people speculating about how it happened. There's been acres of press coverage, of TV coverage. There's been probably 3 or 4 TV documentaries at least, 1 TV fictional recreation of it already, at least 10 books about it. So this is not as though we're weighing in on something that is, you know, that's not already being talked about in a massive way. That was the starting point for why we were interested in the story. But, you know, from my point of view, in terms of the individual people involved in the case, you know, we've shown it to the journalists who kind of feel it's an accurate version of the case, accurate version of the journalist. We've shown it to the Kircher family, and that's why the caption's on there, because they feel is a kind of appropriate way of trying to remember the fact that there was a girl killed who had all her life in front of her, went to Italy just a few weeks before and had all the kind of optimism and sort of idea of like all the good things that could happen to her there, and then was killed tragically. And they feel that this is a way of remembering her in a fair way. And we've shown it to the blogger who was very much felt that in our film that felt that Amanda Knox was innocent, who feels it's fair accurate representation. So in other words, everyone who's seen it feels that this is the trial as it is in our film simply represents what happened. And as it's clear in the film, we're not interested in whether who's guilty, who's not. I personally don't feel it's possible to know. I certainly don't have an opinion about it. The whole point of our film is that actually whatever happened that night, Meredith Kircher was killed. Whatever happened that night in a murder case, someone lost their life, someone lost their chance for happiness. A family lost their daughter, lost their sister, and that's the important thing, and that's incontrovertible. Obviously the most important thing about the case.
And I'd just like to add to that we did struggle a bit about how to do it. It was a bit of a journey. We worked very, very hard trying to work out what's the best possible way. I've also done a lot of real-life people, and at the end of the day, you want to give a true emotional story about it, because often it's not possible to do a kind of factual kind of biopic-y thing. You want to give an emotional truth to it, and we struggle with that, and so we put that in the film. That's what's in the film. The guy who's trying to make the film is struggling to make it because it's a difficult thing, and that struggle, that analysis of that struggle hasn't been done by many of the people involved, to be honest.
I guess that's why I thought the Inferno and Dante aspect was quite clever, because Thomas, Daniel's character, he's fascinated by the Inferno, and meeting Melanie, Cora's character, he thinks, why are we making a film? Why are we fascinated about narratives about horror, when actually we maybe should be celebrating the paradise aspect and remembering someone through love. So I think that was quite a clever way in the script and the story of celebrating that.